going to do a little bit of a live breakdown of old Brennan Herrera's gun meme review. Canadian Jesus is here. Nice. Nice. So yeah, we're going to check this out, and then we'll probably stream some games.
Meme review.
Right? Only good times to be had. I'm Super Shep. I'm glad you didn't get destroyed by a tornado. I am having a nice day. Tornado free and everything.
What is up, you sexy YouTube mother lovers, and welcome back to another episode of Gun Meme Review. This one, we have a very special announcement. On behalf of myself and every other tax-paying American, I'd like to inform you that the U.S. military has adopted a new service rifle. That's right, the military has finally made up its...
This is a huge deal, actually. Again, you have to think the U.S. military... Now, it's worth noting that the diffusion of a new service rifle through the military is usually very slow, a very slow process. But it's good to know that it will start. Often these things start with elite units or active duty units, and then we'll usually combat facing ones. So 82nd Airborne will probably get it first, and then it'll diffuse its way through the Army into regular active duty units, into the Marine Corps, and then then finally it'll work its way to reserve component units. So expect this to be a multi-year process, possibly decade-long process of getting this rifle out.
Its mind about who is winning the NGSW, or the Next Generation Squad Weapon Program. After a lot of time, money, and prototypes, Sig has won the contract with the MCX Spear. And Sig fanboys all over the planet have not stopped creaming themselves since. Now, there's a lot of information to dive into as
thanks for the sub, Benno Burks.
to what this contract actually means. So I'm going to get into that, but more importantly, there's a lot of memes that have been floating around these last few days because of it. So let's go over those. So the contract was not just...
So when he talks about squad weapon, what he means is a squad machine gun, a squad automatic weapon. Currently, we have the M249 squad automatic weapon, or SAW. So the fact that this too is going to be replaced, I actually think it's probably a good thing that it's going to be replaced by the same manufacturer. This will probably encourage parts compatibility and economies of scale, especially on things like production and maintenance, parts, and all of that.
For the combat rifle, now being called the XM5.
Hello, Smuggy.
It was also for a next generation light machine gun.
Right. This is what I'm talking about. You guys can see there's a lot of considerable similarity in terms of the parts. These have very similar adjustable stocks, very similar, possibly even interchangeable handguards. Looks like similar trigger groups, safeties. Yeah, it'll be nice. These look like they will almost be like functionally almost identical.
Gun called the XM250 to replace things like the M249 SAW, as well as the new proprietary 6.8mm cartridge that both are going to be chambered in. Then, of course, yeah.
That is also really interesting. Though it's like a SAW, right? The SAW is also chambered in a 5.56, as is the M4. And that just is, again, a logistical... it's just logistically easy. One kind of round. And yes, it's bigger, punchier. Is the 5.56 a huge problem? It depends. In Afghanistan, just engagement distances were longer, but you also had places like Iraq and Afghanistan where engagement distances were much shorter. And so, but I think in both cases, the Army probably found that 210 rounds was more than sufficient. Soldiers were rarely so cut off that they ran out of ammo. So the original purpose of going to that smaller 5.56 round was because ultimately it was lighter and easier to carry. Soldiers could carry more rounds and fit more into a magazine. And the fact is that you don't usually run out, right? Soldiers operate out of vehicles. There just hasn't been the same level of supply needs. Supply chains and logistics on the battlefield have improved enough that you don't need to sacrifice weight and punching power and effective distance quite as much as you had to in, say, the Vietnam era.
Yeah, Sig got the contract. Sig wins another government contract. Every other gun manufacturer, or just people in general.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Now, it is a little weird that Sig won both the contract for the military's new handgun a couple years ago, and also now this next generation squad weapon contract for the new combat rifle and light machine gun. A little weird. A lot of people are saying this is clear evidence that Sig is bribing their way into government contracts. Now, this could be the case, or it could just be that...
Now, listen, okay, here's the thing. Bribing, there's usually extra steps of how this works. So if you want to win a government contract, you don't just pay people to get your W, right? That's fraud, and that's illegal. What you do instead is you hire or you get in good with the offices that are preparing to put the requirements out for the rifle, right? And so let's say it has, when they say, hey, the US military is like, great, we want a rifle with these 5 characteristics. Well, if you know what SIG can do best, you make it obvious that SIG is going to be the winner because you ask it to do things that are that SIG is already prepared to do, right? And so there is a bid, and this is what I'm talking about. So you'll come out as a government office, you'll say, hey, the Army is looking for a new squad weapon, or a new individual rifleman combat rifle. It needs to engage targets at least at this distance. It needs to fire this sort of round. It needs to be this accurate and this light. And they know that SIG already has a round that behaves that way. It's their proprietary round. Other people cannot use it, right? So it's appealing because if the requirements are such that it has to be accurate over a certain distance and retain a certain amount of kinetic energy over time, then a 6.8 weapon is going to have to win. And if a 6.8 weapon has to win, it means that the SIG is going to always come out on top. So that's one way you can sort of rig the bidding. The other way is to hire people who were involved in writing the contract, though usually there is a 2 to 3 year window. It may even just be 1, where you leave a program office that's put a contract out to bid. You have to wait 12 months before you can be hired by someone bidding on that contract. But because military acquisitions are impossibly slow, it's still totally possible to literally just poach people as they come out of the office that wrote the contract, bring them into SIG and go, hey, listen, it's been 12 months. We want you to come in and help us win this contract that you wrote the requirements for. And so they'll sit there and go, okay, so this is going to be reviewed by General Snuffy, and General Snuffy, he was in the 10th Mountain, and he really cares that he's going to look carefully about these rifles' ability to be sustained in cold weather, and that's going to be really important. And then it's going to go to this other program office, and it's run by this guy, and we know he doesn't look that carefully, so you want to just make sure that it's passes through that. I wouldn't worry too much about it, right? You get that inside baseball that lets you just come out a few percentage points ahead of every event, and that's really a very effective way to do this sort of thing. But that's what it comes down to. It comes down to insider baseball, insider knowledge, being able to hire on experts. And the other reality is that if you're good at winning government contracts, especially in the DoD, is so Byzantine and so arcane that if you've done it once, it's like a skill in and of itself. It's so complicated. It's almost like its own. It's not almost like, it is its own business. There are entire businesses that do nothing but say, hey, do you want to win a government contract? Hire us and we will handhold you through the process. That's how complex it can be. And so if you're someone like Sig, who has mastered the art of winning DoD contracts, then you're going to be head and shoulders above another manufacturer, say, that tries to win contracts from other countries or other, smaller contracts, police departments, that sort of thing.
Sig is just that much better than anybody else at making good quality firearms.
Or at winning those contracts, right? Which is not the same thing as making a good quality firearm.
So yeah, it could be a bribe. I don't fucking know. But yes, the Sig MCX Spear beat out the other competitors for this particular contract, specifically the General Dynamics prototype and the Textron, both of which are different prototypes made by other companies to try to fit the parameters of the NGSW.
Right. See, this is what I'm talking about. Look, so here is the Sig MCX Spear. It shoots a normal person's ammunition, right? It's in a brass steel hybrid. It's just normal, right? The only way these other competitors were able to produce a weapon that met the requirements without using SIG's already existing proprietary round was to create entirely new types of casing, right? Look, a polymer cased ammunition. This is crazy. These are like two really forward-looking technologies, but probably, I imagine, extremely expensive to manufacture, right? A polymer casing is probably going to run you north of $1 a round, whereas these are probably 10 cents, 25 cents, something like that. It's obvious that this contract could only be won by the 6.8 round.
Contract. Now, the Textron prototype looks fairly similar to the MCX Spear. The General Dynamics prototype, however, well, it's clear that they weren't copying anybody's homework. So there is a lot going on with that weapon, from that weird flash hider muzzle brake suppressor thing on the end that's pretty unique, to the fact that it's a bullpup. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video at ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCall, and today we take a look at the General Dynamics failed bid for the NGSW program.
I mean, this thing actually looks pretty cool. It actually looks like a future rifle. Who knows? Maybe it is the best. I mean, that just having a shortened suppressor is pretty cool, honestly.
I personally can't wait for the day that Ian does a breakdown of this gun, because there's clearly a lot going on, and I would just love to see what the team at General Dynamics were thinking. Truly. Because I have no idea. Now, if you'd like to see me get my...
I mean, General Dynamics can make some really funky stuff. Like, I think of General Dynamics sort of broadly as being one of the people willing to really push the envelope in military technology. Like, they tend to show up with stuff that just no one else has thought of.
Hands on the Sig XM5, or maybe even its light machine gun counterpart, the XM250, go ahead and subscribe. I mean, no idea how long it's going to take me to do that, but
it could happen one day.
It could happen. But if you're enjoying this gun meme review anyway, honestly, you might as well subscribe. We do this a lot here. We have you surrounded. Come eat your 80,000 PSI of chamber pressure. I hate SIG, I hate SIG, I hate SIG. So that's the other thing. Apparently the SIG
Why are they UN troops?
prototypes are built with a chamber that is supposed to withstand the maximum pressure of like 80,000 PSI. That's pretty fucking crazy, considering that the 5.56, which the M4 and the M249 are chambered in, that's much more like the 60,000 PSI maximum chamber pressure. Shit, even 50 BMG is more in line with that 60,000 max PSI. So 80,000 PSI is pretty fucking excessive. Which leads me to speculate, out of this new 6.8mm cartridge, they're gonna try to push a lot more velocity. Now
I mean, this is another thing. Again, if you're like, hey, you need to have this 80,000 chamber PSI, that could literally have just been added so that the SIG wins the contract, right? I mean, it could happen. SIG's like, hey, we actually built this chamber, and believe it or not, just because of a quirk of the design and our metallurgy, it can withstand a tremendous amount of pressure. And if your goal is to have SIG win the contract, then you just write in some crazy bananas engineering thing that says, hey, you actually have to be able to hold 80 PSI. Not clear that it's essential, but it allows them to win in another dimension of the contract.
They've openly stated that longer ranges and armor penetration are some of the goals of the program, which makes me think that they're moving toward hotter cartridges, more like the M855A1 and its 308 bigger brother, the M80A1. Armor penetrating projectiles while also having the cartridge itself loaded a little bit hotter.
I mean, it is true, right? The military has to be looking. The days of fighting unarmored opponents have basically passed. We see this in Ukraine on both sides. Almost every fighter has at least what look like level 4 plates in a plate carrier. In the case of the Russians, it looks like they have full proper body armor.
Because what penetrates armor is velocity and harder tips, even if it is just the tip. Also, some memes have begun to point out that the US military has given no love in this trial to the HK-417. You know, the battle rifle that's basically done the same thing as the MCX Spear, but for the last 15 years. It's okay, HK-417. I still think you're neat. Now, honestly, whether you work at
I don't know enough about the HK-417 to weigh in.
Sig, Textron, or General Dynamics, designing a weapon system like this for a military trial is no easy feat. My hat's off to all the weapon engineers that put their blood, sweat, and tears into these projects. And if anyone...
I mean, I love how the fact that he's designed one gun and now understands that these are monumental. I mean, truly, to design a weapon from the ground up is pretty unprecedented. It is really, really, really hard to do. And it's a testament that they pulled it off and met these requirements of like a modern battle rifle.
Anyone out there thinks that they want to be part of the next generation that pushes the next gen military weapon systems, I'd recommend checking out SDI. SDI, or Sonoran Desert Institute, is an accredited university that really helps lay down a solid foundation.
All right, let's skip.
Spear that some people seem to...
I don't know SDI, so I don't want to, run their ads on my channel.
Recently posted out this photo of the Sig XM5 with its vortex optic
Holy
that's supposed to be issued with.
smokes.
That is drawn to scale. As he so eloquently put...
That is an insane, huge optic.
Puts it, oh god, the weight. Now, on paper, the Sig XM5 isn't that heavy. I think it only comes in at like 8.3, 8.4 pounds unloaded, but I'm not sure if that includes the suppressor or not. And it sure as shit doesn't include that big-ass optic. Speaking of optic, though, that's the other thing that just got adopted through this whole next-gen squad weapon program. The new Vortex optic. I guess the designation for this is it's the Vortex XM157 next-generation squad weapon fire control.
Wow, that is a very military designation.
Here, fire control, I think a fire control group, like a trigger group, but...
Oh, I think a fire control, like a fire direction center, like fire controls, like azimuths and phase lines and stuff.
Fire control in this case is referring to an optic. It's the government. It's fucking confusing. And speaking of confusing, Vortex just won a $2.7 billion contract as part
Ooh, Vortex. 2.7 billiones.
this whole deal
That's a fucking win.
to make this confusing optic. Now, it does have a backup etched reticle, but this optic is supposed to be basically fucking Cortana. The real Cortana, not the one from the Halo show. I'm not hating yet, but I guess that's my standard for 2022 TV shows. These XM157 optics include an
Haven't seen Halo, no hurry to.
amazing set of features.
Oh god.
Variable magnification optic, backup etched reticle, laser rangefinder, ballistic calculator, atmospheric sensor suite, compass, intra-soldier wireless, visible and infrared aiming lasers, and a digital display overlay.
Oh my god. This is gonna be a disaster. I can already tell. Why is that? It's because the military loves features. But here's the thing. If you put a gazillion features on an optic, you have to train people to be experts at it. Experts at it. That's the catch. So if you have someone who has the atmospheric sensor suite pulled up in a firefight and they panic and they can't close it out to actually shoot something, then you're wasting your time. Or you've also wasted your time if you just tell basic training privates, hey, we don't have time to teach you about the atmospheric sensor suite or the compass or the intra-soldier wireless. We're just going to teach you how to use the etched sight. Then you've wasted your time. You might as well have just given them an etched sight on day one. Also, what happens when it runs out of battery? Like a soldier forgets to turn it off after a firefight and runs out.
So basically, it's so complex that your optic is now capable of giving you the blue screen of death. The way this shit is going, in 5 years I wouldn't be surprised if your...
And if it's wirelessly connected, you could definitely hack it. Like, definitely. And how easy would that be for an adversary to fly, say, a drone overhead and broadcast something that makes the optic think that it's connecting to the inter-soldier wireless, and then just upload a whole bunch of virus software to make it so that the weapon either can't fire or that it just gives false data, right? Changes the zero, puts a bunch of gibberish on the screen, just about anything.
Optic can also detect if you're injured and have Amazon drone deliver to you an instant tourniquet. That was a joke, by the way. That was a joke. No, vortex. That was a joke. Stop writing that down. Vortex, stop! When you're trying to return fire, but your optic won't stop telling you how humid it is.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. That is 100% what's going to happen.
As we're learning nothing from the Russians about conscript proofing your basic infantry rifle. Yes, I know that our standard, entry-level infantry training is supposed to be better, but Jesus Christ, guys, that sounds complicated. So anyhow, I hear the number 20,000. I think it's 20,000 of these new XM5 rifles are going to be ordered and fielded.
That's like one brigade.
And kind of
maybe like two.
I've experimented with and see if it's something that the military wants to use to completely replace the M4. Many have come before it and tried, but let's see if the Sig XM5 has the juice to dethrone the M4. Honestly, it's a cool looking rifle, even though I personally prefer the aesthetic of the Scar. But I'm really more interested in that light machine gun, considering that comes in at like an ungodly 12 pounds.
Jesus Christ.
That's less than half the weight of the M240 Bravo, which is the light machine gun it will also be replacing. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah, but the M240 is heavy. It's really a mounted weapon.
But who knows? We'll see how this all works out with these experimental rifles, and whether or not the US military is going to have to reject modernity and return to tradition.
I mean, I'm hoping. It's just the military loves adding features to their technology. Instead of being like, we want a rifle and an optic that does 2 or 3 things, 11 out of 10, just like awesome. They go, why don't we add features onto this thing until it becomes an abomination? The F-35 is a great example. Instead of being like, hey, we need a deep strike fighter. Make the best deep strike fighter you can. Instead, they said, well, we want it to have VTOL, and we want it to be a deep strike fighter and an interceptor and an air-to-air combat and an air-to-ground combat and be able to do electronic warfare. And it's just like, and we want it to fly at Mach 17. And you're just like, it's never going to happen. You want too many mutually exclusive things. And the result is it's going to do all of them terribly, right? It's human beings are the same way, right? It's like the old jack of all trades. You can't master everything. You have to choose one, possibly 2 things to be great at and move on with your life, right? And do them to a great degree. If you want a different, right? If you want a different tool that tells you the humidity or is, interchangeable with 50 other different battlefield roles, then it's not going to happen. Build 50 different other items to fulfill those battlefield roles.
Now, if you're ready for us to finally move on past this SIG topic, don't worry, we have plenty more gun memes for you guys. ATF, not a firearm. Firearm. That's as clear as I can make it.
I mean, the ATF, listen, this is not new. This has always been sort of the law, right? So what he's talking about, of course, is this is an antique revolver, right? Per federal law, anything manufactured before like 1880 is not a firearm. It's considered an antique. They're considered so old and designed before so much modern firearm safety and firearm reliability that functionally they're not firearms, right? So these are like black powder rifles. They're extremely specialty. You have to put the powder in, you have to put the cartridge in separately. It's like a musket with a cylinder. So yeah, not a firearm, right? This is treated like a firework basically. And this, of course, is considered an 80% lower, right? In terms of, because you can change the parts of firearms back and forth again and again, you can get new barrels, new optics. new buttstocks, they have to say, okay, there's got to be one part that we point down and say, this one part is the firearm, and everything else is a firearm accessory. And what they have said is it's the lower receiver where the trigger meets the chamber and that the rounds pass through. It's a perfectly, if you're going to pick one central part, it's going to be the upper or lower receiver. That's it. And so they said, okay, it's the lower receiver. Fine. Well, what they started doing, and this is probably pretty sketch, honestly, manufacturers would sell something that was not a lower receiver. It was a piece of steel in the exact shape as a lower receiver. But if you had access to a basic machine shop and metal drills that could punch holes in specific areas, you could turn that piece of metal into a lower receiver. And because you built it yourself, there's not really a record of this gun existing because you manufactured it in your house, technically. And then once you've created the firearm, the lower receiver with the appropriate hills drilled out, then you just buy accessories like a buttstock, an upper receiver, a barrel, a trigger group, and all of a sudden for $300, you've built a actually extremely high-end AR-15 that there's no serial number for. Pretty wild. And it's a pretty like janky loophole. And the fact that people are mad that it's being closed, I think is like pretty stupid. Also, because encouraging people to manufacture high performance firearms in their home is like a recipe for disaster.
This referring, of course, to the video that we just released about how black powder guns aren't technically firearms. They fall under antiques, which means that somehow this is not a firearm, but a milled piece of aluminum is. I understand why they make the classification, but doesn't make it any less weird on the surface. Now, speaking of the ATF, a video that we made, well, 2 videos ago, was on Biden's attempt to now go after ghost guns or 80%. We're going after ghost guns. But they're still legal for now. You have 120 days. And unserialized guns already owned or grandfathered. Well, yeah. And without a serial number, you can't prove a manufacture date. Angie. I mean,
it's technically true. Also, thanks for the support, Chica Harari. They want general multi-purpose, not something that's specialized. The whole line is a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. It's true, but there's a point in which there's too many widgets on your Swiss Army knife, right? At some point, a Swiss Army knife is cool because it has a terrible knife, a terrible corkscrew, a terrible can opener, and a terrible pair of scissors. But it fits in your pocket, right? That's what makes a Swiss Army knife great. It's a few functions. It acknowledges that they're all sort of terrible at them. But what would happen if you were to sit there and be like, hey, we actually want it to have a full set of scissors, like not a bad scissors, but we want it to be a top tier scissor. And we want the knife to be as good as a K-bar. And, oh yeah, we want it to do 4 other things. We want it to also have a nail file, a scalpel. We want it to have a clamp somehow. You would end up with this abomination that's this big and that has these needlessly complex, and it just defeats the whole purpose. And I think that's what I mean by the military over-engineers things, is that they put too many requirements instead of being like, hey, the basics will be good enough, right?
You guys got a point. It's kind of like how after Freedom Week in California, where they had that week that the judge put the stay on the 30-round magazine ban, everybody was able to flood the state with, standard capacity magazines, and then it was really hard to prove who had it before the ban and who didn't. So to speak, there's what's legal, and then there's what's enforceable. It's still going to be bad news for the people that are manufacturing the 80% and the parts kits and things, but for the general consumer that already has one, that's going to be very hard to enforce. Of course, no.
Yeah, again, I really struggle to have sympathy for 80%. They're called 80% because 80% of the manufacturing of the lower receiver is done. The final 20% is on you, the consumer. Again, I just can't get behind. I can't get behind DIY AR-15s.
None of this matters anyway if you have a 3D printer, right? You did it. You bought a 3D printer. Now you can make all the guns. You read Control Pew's guide and even calibrated your E-steps. Of course, you forgot routine maintenance, and now every print is a failure and your machine exclusively makes spaghetti. Or maybe it's just a random fluke problem and you chase it for weeks. Welcome to 3D2A. The amount of people who've never used a 3D printer that seem to simp all over the internet thinking that it's just a magic box that instantly makes whatever the fuck you want it to out of plastic, it's really not that simple.
Yeah, that's another thing worth noting is the gee whiz, like 3D printing. You'll 3D print an AR. Would you 3D print a car? You could always make a shitty gun. That was always allowed, right? You just can't make. The question is, can you make a really functional gun or a safe gun? And that's not as clear.
3D printers, when they're properly dialed in, using the correct filaments, temperatures, whatever, they can run pretty reliably. But troubleshooting 3D printers that are misbehaving have led to more than a few sleepless nights. TLDR, if you think you could just open up a 3D printer out of the box, shove a USB with all your files on it, and just have parts start spitting themselves out, you're off your fucking rocker. That being
Yeah, it's a fact, Jack.
said, the spirit of the 3D printing gun community is just American as fuck. I am actually giving away a 3D printer to commenters on that 80% video that we did a couple days ago. Should be releasing that, the winner of that soon. Announcing the winner of that, not releasing.
Yeah, there is some cool stuff, right? One of my favorite bros, Major Kill of Warhammer 40k fame, he decided he was going to manufacture his own minis by commissioning an artist to design original works, and then he 3D printed them from his home. He has 3D printers that just make these minis, and yeah, that he has an in-home manufacturing business, which is incredible and also like pretty cool. But again, as Telruin points out, yeah, 3D printers can be moody, the calibration can be off by a few degrees, and everything can be pretty rough. But I think it's something where if you commit to getting good at it, but the only way to get good at it is to not buy a 3D printer to make your one widget, right? You've got to be like, hey, I'm buying this 3D printer either because I need lots of different plastic parts. For example, I am constantly fixing the plumbing in my house, right? And I need to 3D print custom pipes or something. Or you are someone like Major Kill who's literally doing it as an in-house factory. Then it's worth it to put all the time and effort into getting your 3D printers right.
He's not tied up in my basement. Allegedly. My carry guns, watching me clean my range guns. Joke's on you, I don't clean my range guns either. Honestly, my carry guns get pretty fucking filthy. I try to at least give them a basic clean every now and again, but it's inevitable. They're gonna get pretty fucked up. And that's why you carry the most reliable shit you can. And if you can't, you carry an XD.
Ah, man, he's got gun jokes.
Kidding, kinda. But what do you carry? Just an honest curiosity, not an engagement question that will lead to pandemonium down in the comments.
Oh, God.
You know, when it's your first home invasion and you're kind of nervous because the robber won't stop saying please and I have a family, bro. Shut up. I have the talking stick.
It's pretty funny.
I mean, honestly, I live in Texas, so if you have a family, bro, you probably shouldn't be breaking into houses. A lot of motherfuckers around here have talking sticks.
Yeah, that's a Texas fact, dude. You should just assume every house in Texas has a gun in it. Like, you should just assume it.
Having money. Ammo prices. Yeah, I do be missing the days of pre-coof ammo. Remembering 20 cents a round, 7.62 by 39 makes my heart
Wow, 20 cents.
well, and then hurt.
Now look at us.
Speaking of which, how do you think the
Inflation.
military's move to 6.8 is going to affect 5.56 prices? On one hand, there should be a surplus in the market. On the other hand,
As discussed, we are 10 years away from this service rifle being fully vetted and fielded. Hopefully it'd be nice if 5.56. Also, there's still a lot of other countries that run 5.56. NATO.
Maybe less companies trying to manufacture it in hopes of getting it purchased by the military. I mean, I'm obviously kind of an AK guy. I don't shoot a lot of 5.56, but at the same time, there's 5.56 AKs too. I have a small collection of historic and modern firearms. Wow, you must have a huge safe.
Mm-hmm.
You do have a safe, right? Not gonna lie.
Here's the thing. Here's the danger, right? If you live in somewhere, you don't have your guns locked up, other people can steal them. If they break into your house and you're not there, then your guns aren't protecting you. Your guns are the target.
Feeling a little attacked on that one. And a little offended you think so little of me that my collection could fit in a safe. I currently prefer safe rooms, and maybe one of these days I'll graduate to demo ranch status and have an underground bunker. Man's gotta have goals, right?
That's a goal, I guess.
Now, guys, that is just about all I have for you this episode of Gun Meme Review. I appreciate your support. I love you. Say it back. And be sure to double check real quick if you don't mind to make sure that you are still subscribed. YouTube is still doing that kind of screwy thing where they're purging subscribers. Hopefully it's not targeted, but a lot of you guys are saying that you're being unsubscribed. So if you could check, it would mean the world to me. Anyhow, that's all we've got for you today. Have a good weekend, and I will see you sexy YouTube mother lovers.
All right. Well, that was fun. Yeah. I that is the closest thing to military news that I get. Oh, look, he was right.
So I said, no, it was supposed to be my pentakill. Why did you do that to me? I killed, I know, 1, 2, 3 for champion.